Vietnam veterans. Let's see. I got to have your hands high, high, high. Vietnam Desert Storm. Anyhow, this is about the different memorials that are across the United States. So I'd like you all to please welcome Colonel Nahas, who was in Vietnam and Desert Storm. Please give him a nice round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlis. It's really a pleasure for me to be here tonight. As Marla said, I did start in my career in Vietnam with the 101st Airborne Division, was there for 18 months. And then I didn't know enough to get out of the Army, so they caught me for Desert Storm as well before I got out. The book is called Warriors Remembered, and I wrote it as the welcome home that a lot of Vietnam veterans never got. So it is a photo documentary of 100 Vietnam veteran memorials from all 50 states. And the stories are the struggles that the mainly Vietnam veterans went to build those memorials, and also the specific features about those memorials so that it acts as a travel guide. The book is broken into 9 geographic regions with a map that shows where the memorials are. And I really encourage folks to visit the memorials, both for their own benefit and to pay honor to those whose the memorials represent. So I'm going to take you on a short tour of some of those memorials and give you some of the stories. The books are in the lobby, and tonight there's a special 25% discount on those books. So they come out to $40, including the tax. The picture on the cover of the book is a memorial that started me on this trip. It's called Wings of an Eagle. It's in Missoula, Montana. And as you can see, it's a fatherly angel lifting a soldier from the battlefield. And the sculptress leaves it up to you to decide if this is a warrior being saved from the horrors of war or being taken to his final reward. It's very in detail, correct for uniform and everything. And it's, again, called Wings of an Eagle in Missoula, Montana. Another memorial that I knew I had to go see is called Hill 881 South. Hill 881 South was a Marine Corps battle around Khe Sanh, and in April 1967, there was a Marine combat artist, his name was Austin Duell, who was actually on Hill 881 South and observed this scene. As part of his art therapy, he made a small mock-up of this memorial, and that's how that memorial got started. What the rain has done to this radio operator's face is something that no sculpture could do, and that is streak the radio operator's face with the tears that, to me, represented the anguish of war. And this photograph was on my notebook for the 6 years that it took me to complete this, this journey. And it encouraged me to keep going to finish the book. A third memorial that I knew I had to go see is in Angel Fire, New Mexico. And many of you may have seen this memorial. It's about 35 miles south of Taos in northern New Mexico. This is called the Peace and Brotherhood Chapel, and like every memorial, it has a unique story. Dr. and Mrs. Westfall's son, David, was a first lieutenant in the Marine Corps. And in March of 1968, he was killed in action at an ambush in Vietnam. They decided to take the insurance money that they were paid by the government and build this Peace and Brotherhood Chapel, both to honor the fallen warriors of Vietnam and also to make a statement about the war. Inside the chapel are 13 photographs. The middle one is their son David, and the other 12 are rotated alphabetically by state each month. And their biographies are in that stand there on the left side, so that you can read what the potential was for each of these lost warriors before they lost their lives in Vietnam. Later in life, Dr. Westfall went to Vietnam and visited the ambush site where his son was killed. And he discovered at that time that there were 13 Marines who lost their lives in that battle. He did not know that when he chose the number 13 for the number of photographs that he put on the wall. And this is some of the spiritual content that you will see as you visit these memorials. I'll take you on a short tour around the U.S. This is Ocean Springs, Mississippi. It is the state memorial for Mississippi. And I had an Australian infantryman email me and saying, I really like this memorial in your book. He said, because it shows the flags of all the allied nations that fought with the U.S. in Vietnam. And indeed, the Australian flag is there. Inside that memorial, the folks of Mississippi have done a great thing. And that is, wherever they could find a photograph of their 687 lost warriors, they etched that photograph in a granite panel and put it on the wall above their name. It looks like a high school yearbook, and it's a reminder to many who visit it of that iconic book about Vietnam. We were soldiers once and young, and indeed we were all a lot younger then. Going north to North Carolina, North Carolina is one of a handful of states that actually has two Vietnam veteran memorials, one at the state capitol, and this one, which is at a rest stop on Interstate 85, just south of Thomasville. It's called the brick capital of the world, so the memorial is made of brick. And if you look in the back of the memorial, you'll see that there is a brick wall there with 1,624 individually inscribed bricks, one for each fallen warrior from North Carolina. But there's two sentences on a plaque to the entrance to this memorial that really caught my attention. And I discovered a third memorial in North Carolina. If this looks like a bunch of pine trees, that's exactly what it is. In 1986, the Highway Department was rerouting the north-south lanes of I-85 south of Thomasville. And they created a median that was 300 feet wide by 3 miles long. In that median, a young Vietnam veteran named Ray Everest convinced the forestry department to donate 58,000 loblolly pine tree saplings. With volunteer and contract labor, they were able to plant over 58,000 pine trees, one for every lost warrior from Vietnam. Now this picture was, thank you. This picture was taken 20 years later, and the pine trees are all mature, but a loblolly pine tree has an expected lifespan of 150 years. So long after anybody will remember why those pine trees were planted, there's a living memorial for every lost warrior from Vietnam on the interstate highway south of Thomasville in North Carolina. The only place that you'll find that story is in Warriors Remembered, because I talked to Ray Everest and got him to tell me about why those trees were planted. If you go to Washington, and I'm sure many of you have been there and visited the National Vietnam Veterans Memorial, some of you may not realize that there's really 4 parts to that memorial. 2 years after the wall was dedicated, the 3 soldier statue was dedicated to honor the veterans, those of us that managed to make it home. Just to the left of those 3 soldiers is what's called an in-memory plaque, and that was put in 2004 to honor all those who died from the effects of the war, but whose names would never appear on the wall. About 300 feet further to the east of that is the Vietnam Women's Memorial. And many of you may know that there are 8 nurses whose names appear on the wall in Washington, but there were actually 57 women who lost their lives in Vietnam. They worked for the Red Cross or the CIA or NSA or some other government agency, so their names could not be inscribed on the wall. But nevertheless, this memorial honors them. And then there's the wall itself. And if you do visit Washington and go to the wall, I strongly encourage you to go early in the morning, if possible, before all the crowds get there. And you can really feel the spirit that is in that wall. My brother, who's also a Vietnam veteran, he and I went to the wall early one Saturday morning. It was about 6:30 in the morning. He was looking at the east wall of the memorial to find the names of those that were killed the day he got wounded in Vietnam. And the sun was streaming down the east wall, very bright, rising sun. I didn't have a digital camera at that time. And when I got the film back, what I realized is that through an accident of photography, I had metered on his image in the wall, and the sun had totally ghosted out where he was standing, and it was as if he was transposed into the wall to join his fallen comrades. This picture is not photoshopped. That's exactly the way it came out. Sometimes accidents are pretty good. If you go up to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, right near Three Rivers Stadium, if you're a Steelers fan, there's a Vietnam memorial that's entitled Welcome Home. And it is somewhat unique of war memorials because it shows a mother welcoming home her son, and also a young bride and her child welcoming home her husband. If you look closely, though, at the eyes of that young mother, you will see the expression on her face is this really the same young man that left me a year ago? And indeed, each one of us is changed by war, and that's the question on this young wife's face as she stares into her husband's eyes. Many of you may have seen an image of this on the internet. Have anybody seen it on the internet? A few. Some of you seen it in person, I know. This is called the Freedom Rock. It's in along the highway just north of Greenfield, Iowa. The man's name there is Bubba Sorensen, and his story also is unique. I met with Bubba, and he told me that in 1999, he saw the movie Saving Private Ryan. He was 19 years old at the time. He was so impressed with the camaraderie and loyalty and dedication of the warriors in that movie that he went out to this boulder on the side of the highway, which had become a graffiti rock, and painted on it, "Thank you, veterans, for our freedom." That was for Memorial Day, 1999. To his surprise, for the next year, nobody painted over what he had written there. So about April of 2000, a group of veterans came to Bubba and said, "What are you going to do for us this year?" Well, Bubba then realized that he was in for an annual event. And indeed, every year, he repaints the entire rock with new scenes of all of America's wars. There's only one part of the rock that he does not paint over, and that is that green helicopter right where he's standing. And the story behind that makes this a very special memorial for Vietnam veterans. In 2006, the Run for the Wall, which is a motorcycle ride from California that goes to Washington, D.C. to get there in time for Memorial Day. They stopped in Greenfield, Iowa, and 6 of those riders had ashes of their fallen buddies who had died that year that they were taking to spread at the wall. One of them was so impressed with what Bubba was doing, he asked if he could spread the ashes instead around this rock. But if you're from Missouri or Iowa, you know that the wind in late April is always blowing about 20 miles an hour. He said, if you spread their ashes here, they're just going to blow away. But if you sprinkle some in my green paint, I will paint their ashes onto the rock. Before that motorcycle group left that day, there were 6 Vietnam veterans who had their ashes painted into that helicopter. Since that time, every year, the northern route of the Run for the Wall stops in Greenfield, Iowa. And when I interviewed Bubba for this book, there were the ashes of a platoon of 20 Vietnam veterans riding in that helicopter. That's why that part of the rock he never paints over. Who can tell me what this is? This is 58,267 dog tags, each stamped individually with a man's name, rank, and branch of service, and they are arranged chronologically by order of date of death, the same way the names appear on the wall. This is in the National Vietnam Veterans Art Museum in Chicago, Illinois. It's called the Silver Cloud because it's in a two-story entryway and it sways slightly when the door downstairs is opened. Its official name is Above and Beyond. And again, like at the wall in Washington, there's one dog tag that hangs above the rest, and that's a blank dog tag to be in memory of all those that died from the effects of the war. This, I'm getting close to the end here, and I saved one of the best till last. This may be the most unusual memorial of any kind that you will find anywhere. This is in Frankfort, Kentucky. It's across the river from the state capitol. It's a 24-foot sundial, and the architect laid out in the plaza of around the sundial the names of the 1,103 warriors lost from Kentucky. He positioned those names in such a way that on the date of the man's death, the point of the shadow of the sundial will cross his name, giving every fallen warrior annually their own personal Memorial Day. It's truly a great engineering feat as well as an amazing memorial. That's Frankfort, Kentucky, and if you're ever in the vicinity, hope for a nice sunny day and go visit. Just on the lighter side, I'll tell a story about this memorial. This is the Southeast Wisconsin Memorial in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, on shores of Lake Michigan. In order to pay for this memorial, the folks of Milwaukee sold big brick pavers to help pay for the memorial. One day, the memorial committee got an envelope with no return address on it. They opened it up and they found $50 in cash, the price of a small paver. And the order form said Jane Fonda. So now they were in a quandary. I mean, they had the money. They had no idea where it came from. So they thought the moral thing to do was to go get a brick with Jane Fonda's name on it. Mysteriously, however, when they were laying those pavers in the plaza there in front of the memorial, that one brick paver got laid name side down. So they had done their duty, but they'd also preserved the sanctity of their memorial. I'm going to close with a poem that is on many Vietnam veteran memorials, but it really is applicable to any veteran. And I'll read it to you because I know some of you may not be able to read it in the back. Major O'Donnell was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam. He wrote this poem on the 1st of January, 1970. In March of that same year, his helicopter did not return to base, and his remains have never been recovered. But as I said, this poem that he wrote really strikes a chord with many Vietnam veterans. If you are able, save a place for them inside of you, and save one backward glance when you are leaving for the places they can no longer go. Be not ashamed to say you love them, though you may or may not have always. Take what they have left you and what they have taught you with their dying, and keep it with your own. And in that time, when men decide and feel safe to call the war insane, take one moment to embrace those gentle heroes you left behind. This is the welcome home that most Vietnam veterans did not receive. I really hope that you will take time to stop and take a look at the book. But even more than that, I hope that you will take the time to visit these memorials and not only honor those whose names appear there, but also all of you who are veterans that have meant so much to this country. Thank you very much.